Hello and welcome to Mystic Dog Mama, the podcast for soul-led dog mamas, where you'll discover how to best nourish your dog and yourself, mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Dr. Alexia Miller. Hello, how are you doing? Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I'm so glad that you're here. Today I wanted to introduce you to someone who's been a big part of my own spiritual journey along the mystical path over the past several years. I've wanted to include conversations about finding the spiritual path and walking it with our dogs because, as you'll know if you've been here for a while, I believe that a big part of why dogs choose us is because throughout time they've played the most beautiful role of walking us home to our true selves. You've probably heard me speak about how I came upon the path of hedgewitchcraft after I began apprenticing with a curandero in Mexico, and just felt like I needed to find an equivalent practice based in my own cultural roots. I set the intention of finding my teacher, and lo and behold, my guest today, Sally Morningstar, showed up. I contacted Sally about the possibility of apprenticing with her, and since then, she's become a source of support and wisdom as I carve out my own path. Throughout her life, nature has been author and hedge witch Sally Morningstar's greatest teacher. Her deep love of the weird and the wild is the inspiration behind her writing, photography, and magical mentoring of those who are also seeking to live consciously and mindfully upon this earth. From the age of 18, Sally began her own search for spiritual answers, which led her to psychic teachers, spiritual mentors in both Eastern and Western mystery traditions, including Vipassana, Zen, Sati, Dzogchen, Shamanism, and even her becoming a High Priestess in Wicca. Ultimately, though, none of that felt right for her until she discovered a sense of home within hedgewitchcraft, which at its core is based upon creating right relationship with all of nature and her creation. What I love about Sally's story is that she often talks about how she's been a hedge witch all of her life without realizing it until her later years. And that's often the way that it goes when we're meant to walk a particular path. That the path is always there, but we may just not have noticed it until we arrive at that place of knowing. In our conversation today, Sally talks about her personal journey to this nature-based spiritual practice and what it means to follow the old ways in our modern context. We talk about what magic really is, how we are all a part of it, and how the most magical path of life is actually the journey of self-discovery. Sally also shares how her sweet 19-year-old canine companion, Rosie Dumpling, has been key to her path. Sally and I have envisioned that this would be a bit of a series of chats, with this first one introducing you to what the practice of hedgewitchcraft actually is, and how you could start to develop your own way of making all of nature a part of your family. She's just so lovely, and I hope you enjoy this conversation and connecting with Sally's energy as much as I do. Before we get started, there are two quick reminders. One is that you have until May 24th to enter to win a free animal communication session for your pet. Rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts. I'm really sorry. I've learned that you can't leave a review on Spotify, so for this particular giveaway, it will only be available to those of you who listen on Apple. I do apologize, but don't worry, I'll be hosting other giveaways in the near future. So leave your review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, and send it to me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. Again, please get it to me by May 24th, 2024, and I'll be announcing the winner on our special 6-month anniversary episode airing June 8th. And another reminder is that this next week is actually Period Poverty Awareness Week. We can't talk about nourishing ourselves, mind, body, and soul without also addressing the need for awareness around menstrual health. My other project, Aspirationary, supports this podcast through creating books, notebooks, and stationery to support you in becoming all you aspire to be. This includes creating journals and workbooks to remove period stigma and empower young girls and tweens to learn about their menstrual cycles, as well as journals and workbooks supporting women to explore how to best align with the power of your menstrual cycles through cyclical living. I invite you to check out these journals on the Aspirationary Instagram account and consider if these books might help support you or a young girl in your life to feel more empowered. Our Instagram account is spelled Aspirationary, and that's ASPIRATIONERY. Okay, on that note, let's go. Hi, Sally. I am so excited to have you on the podcast with me today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and it's wonderful to connect with you, Alexia.
Oh, it's going to be so much fun today to have this conversation because would love to share your wisdom with the Mystic Dog Mama audience because you've been a mentor of mine for a few years now and have been such a support for my spiritual journey and discovering what that path looks like for me. And you just have so much to share with the world. And I'm really excited to bring people into your world, into the Sally Morningstar world, and to also talk about how your sweet pup, Rosie Dumpling, has been a part of your journey.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. She's such a sweet little dog.
Oh,
She's oh, I love her to bits. She's 19 years old now, very old girl. Sadly in decline, but we've had a wonderful time together, and I wouldn't have it any other way. You know,
oh,
she's been my best friend,
oh, I
and
love
she's
that
taught
so
me a
much.
lot. But I think I've taught her a lot too.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Like we've talked about this in our own conversations, but how we bring our dogs into our lives in this mutual way of informing one another, that we're teachers for one another, and it's such a gift to have that kind of a relationship with an animal.
Yes, yes. She teaches me as much as I teach her or guide her. You know, it's
Yeah,
a sort of mutual relationship. And we're so lucky to have dogs.
absolutely. Oh, I agree
We
with you.
really are. They're such a blessing.
They
So
are.
yeah, she's been in my world for 13 years. She was a rescue. Rescued her when she was about 6 years old. And yeah, she's been a real blessing.
Mm.
And it's wonderful that we're having this conversation now because it will be a little legacy for her and my journey together, you know, while she's still with me.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, she
Oh,
might come and say hello, but I don't know. She's asleep. She's having her afternoon nap.
well, if you open up the treats, she might.
I
She
might, yeah,
smells them.
yeah, yeah, she might. We shall
Oh,
see.
Sally, I wondered if you could start off by telling us a little bit about your own personal journey into how you started down the hedge witchcraft path and actually what you see that path as being. How would you kind of characterize hedge witchcraft?
Okay, I think the first thing to say is hedge witchcraft is not a religion. It's got no dogma, it's got no Bible, it's got no teachings as such. It's a way of life. And so you can have any religion or be an atheist, and you can still be a hedge witch. A hedge witch basically is someone who has a deep love and care for nature and the natural world. Um, they normally are separate from society. In other words, they're loners. They tend to be very solitary people. And they enjoy that solitude. It's not being lonely, it's just walking the lone path. Um, so from a very early age, I was brought up in the 50s, and in the 1950s, children were basically pushed out of the door in the morning and told to be home before it was dark. And so my childhood was spent in nature. And oh, what a wonderful childhood it was. Mother Nature became my teacher. She taught me so many things about the cycles of life, the seasons, the elements, animals and their messages, and birds. And oh, it was just magical. I was very, very lucky. But that formed the basis of my future teaching, the future way. it was in my childhood that the seeds of my hedge witchcraft journey were sown.
Mm.
I've always loved nature. Nature is my greatest teacher. I've had a lot of teachers, Zen, Sati, the way of mindfulness, Dzogchen, Eastern and Western mysticism, Native American shamanism. Mother Nature tops them all. She's just incredible. We come from nature, we return to nature, and at our peril, we try to dominate nature. Doesn't work. We're part of the tapestry, but we are not the tapestry itself. We're part of it, the tapestry of creation. So anyone can be a hedge witch. You don't have to want to be a ritualist. You don't have to have altars. You don't have to pray to the gods. You know, you might be a very political person, in which case you might be an environmental hedge witch. You might love crafting. So you would make things like wands and staffs. You might be interested in herbs. And so your journey would be with the plant kingdom and the tree people. Crystals, you might be a healer. We're all born with gifts and skills that are unique to us. And along with the sort of the little handbag that we bring in with us of our own personal baggage, karma, whatever you want to call it, we do have gifts and skills. We're all part of the diamond that is the beauty of creation, and we're each a little facet of that, and we shine our gifts and skills out into the world. But first of all, we have to know what they are. And this is where the wisdom path comes in, because magic, a lot of people think that magic is commanding things to do your will, making something happen for your benefit. Null point. No, the path of magic is actually magia. Magia in Persian is wisdom. And the true great magicians all knew that the way to the real magic was through wisdom and walking the path of wisdom. And what is wisdom? Wisdom is experience. Knowledge can be learned. And you can get a very, very knowledgeable person, but that doesn't make them wise. You can have a very, very wise person who's totally uneducated. Wisdom comes from experience. And hopefully, when we grasp the teaching of that experience, we learn the wisdom message of it. And in learning the wisdom message of it, we become more wise. And it's a never-ending journey. It's ever unfolding. It's the most magical path that we can tread in life, is the journey of self-discovery. I wouldn't be anybody else, even though I've had some difficulties and challenges, but I wouldn't be anybody else. I live such a magical life.
I love that so much, Sally, because I also think that we tend to confound magic with ideas of like escapism and fantasy, think like Harry Potter kind of thing. And so many times when people are seeking magic, they're seeking control, they're seeking to escape their current life, the current situations, or the society that we're in. And in reality, just as you've talked about, but something that has been a direct learning from you for me has been that when you start to engage with magic as an everyday practice of looking for the magic in everything, you become so rooted and grounded in your life. It's not about escaping and separating, it's about fully embedding yourself in this experience. And
Yes.
actually, as like from other kind of text perspectives as well, like A Course in Miracles, for example, which is a text that I have followed for a period in my journey, what starts to happen is that it's your lens that changes. It's not that
Yes.
anything is necessarily changing around you, although that does happen, but it's about the way in which you are perceiving the world around you becomes up level, becomes repurposed as a teacher versus feeling a victim to the circumstances you're in. You become much more engaged in the world around you so that you are going through those experiences that you're describing and transforming them into a state of wisdom.
Yes. Well, life is not a punishment.
Mm,
Um, we have a choice, like you were mentioning, about the lens that we choose to look through. And if we remember that my soul, we each have a soul, we each have a spirit, we each have a spark, is such an incredible teacher. And it is also our best friend. It knows us better than anybody else. And we can often be guilty of running to other people to find the answer. But, you know, the great teachings of all time have always said the answers lie within. And it is absolutely true. And if we become still enough for long enough, the answers are always there.
mm.
We might have to wait. The answers might not come straight away. And they might not come as a sort of an internal prompt. A book might fall off the shelf, or you might see a poster up on someone's wall, and you know that the message is for you. Creation is about interrelationship. I, by the way that I walk through my life, am creating my life as I go. And it is so vitally important, especially in the world today, that we remember the higher qualities of love, tolerance, kindness, gentleness,
Absolutely.
not
Absolutely.
being so defensive, not being such a victim.
Absolutely. Well, how do you feel? I mean, I guess this is a question that I have, and I imagine a lot of listeners have as well, that these traditions, so something like hedge witchcraft is an ancient tradition. And it was something that I came across because I had always been interested in having a deeper connection with the natural world around me, as well as incorporating ideas from shamanism, practices from shamanism, where you are bridging to those other worlds. And I was interested in what that path looked like for me. And when I first kind of stumbled along a lot of this, it came through the path of curanderismo in Mexico. And what didn't resonate for me was that that wasn't my cultural tradition. It didn't feel right for me, but I knew that there was obviously a wisdom within that that was applicable and certainly relevant for a lot of people. And I started to look at, so what does that path look like for me from my own cultural and ethnic perspectives, traditions, etc.
Yeah,
And that's where I started to see the correlation with hedge witchcraft and seeing how far back that went. And there was something that felt at a very physical, visceral level, like a pull towards it, just like a knowing that that was something that I was meant to do. And when I first started to work with you, I think perhaps my point of interest was in the kind of old ways
yeah,
and still is. However, seeing how we're being called in this modern context to really pull those old ways into the world that we're living in now, that they are just as relevant for navigating what it is that we are creating now and what we are then, as a result, creating for the future. And I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that in terms of how you see hedge witchcraft function and the ways of wisdom, the old ways functioning today in a modern context.
right. Wisdom is wisdom,
Mm,
and it will remain pertinent throughout all time. It is achievable by all. We will all have learned something from a mistake. Yep. So going into the sort of the history of hedge witchcraft, some people might think that hedge witchcraft is a form of witchcraft. And actually, historically, it isn't. But As time has progressed, hedge witchcraft has sort of been hooked into witchcraft, because the hedge witch will tend to follow the pagan wheel of the year, for example. But they don't have to. This is the freedom and the liberation of hedge witchcraft, is what works for me. And so we can say with all honesty, my way is the only way. And everybody starts to go, oof, 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 oof. No, there's only one way for me. There's only one way for you. We have to find what that way is. Because when it makes sense in my spirit, in my being, and when I resonate with it, I can journey with it. It makes it possible. It makes it understandable. So a hedge witch could be a Buddhist. A hedge witch, as I say, could be an atheist. It doesn't matter. It's my relationship to my true self and taking that journey back home to the real me. Oh, bliss. So in the old days, a hedge witch would have been the midwife, would have been the herbalist, would have been the blessing witch who came and blessed the children when they were born, would have dealt with someone worried about their crops, would have done divination, because the peasant class could not afford a doctor. That was for the aristocracy. And so in a way, when we look at what's happening in the world today, we are going back to the old ways. More and more, we're having to take responsibility. What goes in my mouth? What is the quality of my food and my water? What comes out of my mouth? Is it kind?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the wisdom teachings will always be relevant. They will never go out of date, even though they're called the ancient wisdom teachings. And they can pop up anywhere. They might be in a Sufi mystic text. They might be in a Judeo-Christian story. It doesn't matter. Wisdom is wisdom. And in fact, it's in all the teachings.
No, absolutely.
Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. And I think, you know, from my perspective as well, something that is particularly relevant about the hedge witchcraft to today is that, just like you were saying, that we are being asked to pay more attention to what we're putting in our mouths in terms of our food, what is coming out of our mouths in terms of what we're speaking, which in many respects can be related to things like spell casting, right? Those ideas of like what we are putting out, what we are iterating into the world will create form. But I think as well, what's really special about hedge witchcraft, whether or not you are practicing it in a ritualistic manner, or you're just using it as a frame of awareness for how you're engaging with the world, is that it asks us about our right relationship with the world around us, with everything around us, and seeing that that is what informs the actions that we take. When we disrespect, when we have this notion that we are separate from nature, for example, and that we're dominating nature, that gives us a kind of permission to then mistreat nature. But when we come from a perspective that recognizes the divinity of all that is around us, all of a sudden you're in a completely different relationship with it. And that informs the way that you engage with it, the kinds of actions that you take in your everyday life. And I think that's something that's particularly pertinent about hedge witchcraft, that is useful for today when we are
Yes,
at these kind of points of crises, which are really not so much, they have an impact in terms of environmental crises, but it's really a crisis of the soul, of how we see ourselves in relationship, who we think we are, and how we see ourselves in relationship to everything around us.
absolutely. Nature can be an incredible teacher and incredibly helpful as well. There was a time when I got lost in a huge woodland, and I was really, really worried, because I thought, I'm going to be stuck here all night. I can't find my way out. I was genuinely lost. And I called for help.
Mm.
And within a few seconds, beep, 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 there was a little group of wrens, which are little tiny birds. And I followed them. I thought, well, there's nothing else I can do. I might as well. This must be the sign. I followed them and they took me to the edge of the wood. When I engage with nature, nature will engage with me. But when I start to care about things, I will also start to take more responsibility for things. I can guarantee you that if we had to go and collect our water in a bucket twice a day, we would value water far more because we would know the value of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, we have come to a point in human evolution where we have to acknowledge the spiritual aspect of human life and what that actually means. Psychosis, the word psychosis, because there are a lot of people suffering with mental health issues at the moment. Psyche means soul. Psychosis is sickness of the soul.
Mm.
So let us remember that we each have a soul, that life isn't all about goals, success, money. Life is about enrichment, being a blessing, touching others, and that includes trees and plants. And I've got a plant in my bedroom. She's called Sylvia. She told me what her name was, and I said, that's a beautiful name. And when I looked it up, do you know what it means?
What?
Of the forest. Isn't that beautiful? She said,
Mm-hmm.
that's my name. And I've got a feeling that lots of plants will be called Sylvia because they're all of the forest.
Right.
So, there's so many blessings waiting for us. But we have to co-create. We have to start taking responsibility for the little negative niggles that we've got of, self-flagellation. Oh, I'm not worthy. Well, hello, you've got a life. You've been gifted a life. That is the gift. And if you weren't worthy, you wouldn't have been given the gift. So let's drop that one straight away. What's another one? I'm not good enough. Start to turn that around. You are good enough. Maybe you could do things a bit better. Do the best that you can in every moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're not here to be perfect. We're here to experience the path of life, a human life path. And, it's not easy. And we're not given an instruction manual. And we are going to go wrong occasionally. The important thing is to learn. The teacher is everywhere. Learn from the teaching. Then drop the guilt, the blame, the shame. Move on with the teaching and let your life unfold, because it will unfold as a result of that extra learning.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's beautiful. And I think I was listening to something recently that was talking about that where that notion of unworthiness actually comes from is from the belief in separation. The kind of, in a sense, like the curse of that belief that we think that we're separate from everything else. And when you can counter that for yourself and see how you actually are connected to everything, that sense of unworthiness becomes a moot point in many respects, because like you're saying, you have a life and you are here playing a part, your particular part that nobody else can play in
Yeah,
this tapestry of life.
yeah,
And I think again that sense of seeing yourself in relationship to everything else from an animistic perspective too. I've brought that up on the podcast previously, that when we take an animistic lens, which hedge witchcraft does, there is soul in everything. That doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean like Disney's Beauty and the Beast version of like your teapot is going to start dancing around and singing, but that there
Oh,
is
mine
that.
does.
Does it? Well,
No, no,
why doesn't mine?
no, not really.
Yeah.
Carry on.
But you know, that sense that there is life force within everything. There is wisdom within everything, and you are part of that. You are
Yes.
not separate from that.
No, we all are. You know, this is the great mystery. The great mystery of life is it will unfold.
Hmm.
And heavens above, if we can step into the part that we're meant to play, it's full of so many blessings for us. Doesn't mean it's necessarily easy. A lot of people who walk the spiritual path will have great challenges
Mm-hmm.
because they need to prove to creation that they can cope
Mm-hmm.
with the extra energy, with the lights and the extra information, the what I call the expanded moment. We become far more aware of what is in that moment.
Yeah. So
So
no, go ahead.
now I can't remember now.
I'm sorry. So, Sally, if somebody was interested in starting to explore for themselves how they are connected to everything, what their soul is asking of them, if that's sort of a I mean, people who are listening to this, it's not a foreign concept at all, but that they are wanting to engage more deeply with that and finding the path that feels right for them, where would you suggest that they might start?
Oh, without sounding dogmatic, because it's important that everybody can choose to start where they would like to start, where they
Mhm.
feel drawn.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, find a place in nature that you really feel peaceful. You feel a sense of home there. And then just be there. Don't go there with a shopping list. Don't go there with your iPod or your iPad. Just go and be you, yourself, and you in relationship to whatever is around you. Breathe, connect to Mother Earth and Father Sky, connect to the landscape, calm down, find the still spot, sink into, if you want to call it meditation, but just quiet contemplation. When we can be still within nature, nature feels us. Nature will sense us anyway, which is why when someone is very chaotic, if they're walking along a path, the birds will stop singing. If you are centered and balanced and calm, life will just carry on chirping as you're walking on through because you're not disturbing the frequencies and the vibrations. Yeah. So, yeah, that's one. I think another would be to have the courage to look at yourself rather than blaming others. Everything else is at fault. I don't have a fault. Let's just very gently start looking at the fact that we can be overly critical, or we can be overly judgmental, or we can be a bit moody. And then just once a day, catch ourselves. No, I'm not going down that route today. Oh, I caught myself. Oh, I caught myself. And then put something positive in its place. I'm a beautiful human being. Or bless that person. I'm sure they're having a hard day today.
Yeah.
You know, let's walk with kindness. And let's also remember that we're all in this together. Nobody is better than anybody else. Nobody is actually worse than anybody else. We're all struggling to survive as best we can in a world that's going more and more chaotic and crazy, to be honest with you,
Mm.
because we've lost our way, because we've lost the spirit.
Yeah. And
The
many
soul.
people,
Mm,
oh, totally. Many people say that this sort of chaos is in reality a kind of a gift for us if we choose to see it that way, that it's that wake up call, that's part of what might be referred to as awakening, ascension, those sorts of terms that ask us to actually confront what it is that we are doing and how we see ourselves, which then again impacts the way that we're engaging with everything. And it's that wake up call for, is this really where we want to be going? We have another choice.
Yes. Well, I mean, the way that we're going on the planet at the moment is not sustainable. So it will come to an end one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
We can take a positive and active part in that by being careful how we live our life, by not buying into the plastics, by not buying Christmas crackers that have got cheap little rubbishy things in them. Make your own,
Mm-hmm.
hand make wrapping paper, recycle, grow your own, share, be a positive influence in your community. I've lost the thread. What were we talking about?
Well, in terms of like the crisis point that we're in and what that's really asking of us, but I think you're right with all that, that it's provoking, which is where you see a lot of a kind of revival of things like an interest in homesteading, an interest in fermentation practices, and in slow living, being connected. I think we are so desperate for that connection to the land again and to one another again. We're seeking that out. I mean, even from a kind of, I was thinking about this the other day, the ways in which we have sanitized our world, that we've made the world something that is dangerous and dirty and disgusting, when in reality, our bodies need us to have our hands in the dirt.
Yeah.
From a microbiome perspective, right? Like there's a very physiological need for that. And you see that that's so much of what we're craving, is that deep connection again. And I think that that is as a result of the kind of chaos that we've been experiencing, pushing us to that realization and saying enough is enough.
Well, yes. I mean, the word that comes to mind is being natural.
Mm,
How many people know how to be naturally themselves? And how many have to feel that they have to put on a show?
mm,
No, you don't. You are enough as you are. You're perfect as you are in each moment, in each unfolding moment. And I think we need to be aware that society doesn't really have a soul. Civilization doesn't have humanity's best interests at heart. It's about governing and ruling, dominating. Oh, I'm going to take that person's castle.
mm,
Yeah. Now, our history, our present moment is based upon that kind of history. So it's a bit wonky. And we need to kind of pull those threads out and backtrack a bit and say, we do need to go back to the old ways. They worked.
mm,
I mean, yes, we've learned how to be more sanitary with water and, to a lot of the diseases were from not being clean.
right.
We've learned that. So we can carry that forward with us. But the actual old ways of the rivers are sacred, the land is sacred and holy, realizing that Mother Earth, she is our mother.
Mm,
She provides us with everything that we need. And look what we are doing to her. And
yeah.
when I say we, not all of us, there are some, more and more people are waking up now. There are some who are really trying to bring something more to the table and to counteract the negative effects of industry and agriculture and the negative sides of that, monoagriculture,
Mm,
etc. I'm sure I don't need to go into that. People who are listening are fully aware.
mm-hmm.
Um, but if we're going to move forward and each of us being a little piece of that sparkling diamond, whatever my gift and skill is, how can I offer it positively to that river of life so that we can bring in the new paradigm? Or actually, we can bring in the old paradigm.
Right, right. No, it's true. And I've
Bring,
actually remembering exactly, exactly. I think that's a lot of the various sort of teachings I've been paying attention to and listening to different channelers and spiritual teachers, etc., that are talking about this huge shift that we're going through on a variety of levels, including kind of astrologically and all of that,
yeah,
moving into the new paradigm. And one of the kind of common threads is that we are moving into a space as we sort of enter into the age of Aquarius, which is focused on like what on humanity, right? Like on these kind of humanitarian concepts, but not from this big overarching perspective, according to the people that I've been listening to, where it's not being done at a government level. It's not being done at a big um, kind of dogmatic level, right? That we're moving from an era of creating these big systems like globalization, even things like capitalism and communism, like the big isms, into the role of the individual and the individual following their own path. And in following their own path, that is how we are rebuilding the tapestry. That is how we are reconnecting to everything around us through the individual recognizing, exploring, and then recognizing what their gifts are, and then expressing them in a variety of ways. That is the path back to exactly what you're saying, the old ways.
yes, I think the important thing to add there is in relationship to
Mm,
my gifts and skills, in relationship to everyone and everything else. Because otherwise it can become quite self
mm,
obsessed and self oriented. You know, does this work for me? And this is another thing about hedge witchcraft is there's a saying for the highest good of all. And we must remember that the highest good includes everybody and everything. And so it might not be in my best interests at that particular moment, but it will be in my best interests overall. So let us remember as we enter the age of Aquarius, which is all about the self, to not be selfish,
mm,
but to be selfless.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
In,
it's that nice paradox that you become selfless by recognizing what you as an individual can offer.
yes, yes. And there is no greater gift than giving.
Mm,
It's not about receiving. We need to learn how to receive well and, you know, to appreciate it, but to give
hmm. Abs-
selflessly, to give with no thought of a reward.
hmm.
Oh, because we're contributing to the well-being of life.
Right,
And we are all contributors. That's why we're here.
right. No, I agree. I agree. And I wonder if you've had this experience actually with Rosie Dumpling, because this has been part of how Lucky has informed my journey. When when he came into my life, of course, there was this sense of bringing in the natural world in a different way and creating this interspecies relationship, which, if you are open to that, opens your eyes to so much more than just your dog and just caring for your dog. But you start to viscerally feel this relationship that we are in with all that is. And even to the point where you and I have talked about this, where you're able to start communicating with them. And that doesn't necessarily look like hearing things in your mind. You might hear things, but you might just get sensations. Or I love how you've talked about as well, like you just sense with your little bug antenna that that Rosie needs water in her water bowl or what have you, that it opens you to that connection with
Mm.
all that is. And I just love that so much. And I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit how Rosie's impacted your journey.
Well, she and I have to communicate psychically now because she's incredibly deaf and very, very blind. And so we have to communicate telepathically. And it works. And she will tell me when her water bowl is empty, or when she wants to go outside, or when she wants something from me, a sausage. She'll be down here and I will feel her. I will sense her. We have these senses. We've had them throughout all time. They haven't gone away. They might be buried because we've not tended to them, but they're there for each and every human being. And so animals communicate on a telepathic level, on a psychic and energetic level. And if I can be quiet enough, I will sense it, I will hear it, I will feel it, whatever is my particular way of getting this information. So yes, Rosie, Dumpling and I have a wonderful sort of little conversation going. I could do an experiment, but I'm not sure that I will, because she's having her afternoon snooze, but I could call her psychically and see if she'll come. Let's do it. Hang on. There we go. We'll just see if she'll come or not. So psyche, the soul, the spirit, everything has that. If we can engage with an animal at the level that an animal can understand, we can communicate with them. Any animal, be it wild or domestic, an animal will know whether you're friend or foe. And for example, the human being has eyes in the front of the head. We're hunters. All hunter species have eyes in the front of the head. So human beings have to be really, really careful when we go out into nature, not to take on that hunter persona. Look, look, seek, seek. You know, where's the birdie? Just come to peace, come to still, come to calm. Glaze over those hunter eyes and just be. And creatures will come.
Oh, it's very true. It's very true. I have started to kind of create this relationship with a particular hummingbird that comes every morning and sits in, and it's almost like he waits for me in the tree, and I just sit with my coffee out and talk to him and just connect. Just connect. And every morning he comes and has that little relationship with me. And this morning, actually, I was out watering some of the plants and he came right past me, just right here.
Magic.
It's beautiful. And that is magic.
Yeah. You see, people mistake the magical path. Magic is actually incredibly simple and it's hidden in plain sight. The more I simplify my life, the more magic can enfold me, because magic is in the simple things. And the more connected I am, the more magic will be there. Like you with your hummingbird.
Definitely. I think for me that what's been interesting working with you along this path has been that there's a very it's kind of hard. We say this every time we talk, that it's really hard to put words to these experiences because they live beyond words. But if I were to try to sort of summarize, like, one of the great gifts for me is that it's been this process. When I first started, I thought it was about doing things out in the world. And it has been this process of, like, slowly coming back in and actually finding the magic in my bones. Like, that's
Yeah.
where it resides, right? And feeling like that's even why so many traditions work with bones when they're doing any kind of a ritual. Like, that is where the magic is. It's in you. It's
We're
in you.
all born with magic in our veins. Yeah. We're all born with that. You know, there's very few children that don't have an experience with a goblin or a fairy or something like that. And it's gradually sort of ground out of us as we get caught up in the grind of life, and I've got to get a job and blah, blah, blah. But no, all of this is still there. And if you want to see the fae, be still. Don't look. Wait. Be patient. Why should they come in your timing?
Mm-hmm.
Nature is not there to entertain me. Nature is living its life. So if I'm going to enter nature, I must be respectful. And if she brings me a gift, she brings me a gift. And if she doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm not being punished. It's not because there's something wrong with me.
Right. Right. No, I love that. And I also, it makes me think about how so often we turn to nature for signs. And
Yeah,
I think that's definitely, that is true, that that does happen. But I also think that you start to see things. It's more that, from my perspective, anyways, from my experience, it's more that you start to recognize things in nature when you become more within your own true nature, rather than waiting for like, oh, should I do this? Let me see a sign, in a sense, giving our power away. But it's more when you reclaim your own power, your own sovereignty, that's when you start to see things coming
yeah.
in that are
Well,
directing
it's
you
the
because
connection thing again.
exactly.
It's the relationship. If I don't have a relationship with nature, then nature doesn't know me. So I need to make nature part of my family,
Mm,
to love her and to take care of her, to be responsible for her, to help if help is needed. Because then she can know me. Then she can feel me and sense me.
mm-hmm,
And then the gifts come. And you can ask questions. Remember, quest, Eon, quest, to go on the quest. Ion, particle. I'm on a particle quest.
oh, I love it. I love
But we
it.
are given the gift of asking. We can ask any question and it will be answered. But as I say, we don't necessarily know in what form. It could arise from within, but it could equally arise from a book falling off a shelf or someone saying something to us.
Mm-hmm. No,
But let
absolutely.
us get used to asking from within rather than running and trying to find something that will sort it out in the external world. We must stop doing that now.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other nuggets that you feel you can leave people with as they are kind of exploring this for themselves? What kind of words of wisdom do you have for somebody who wants to explore a little bit deeper at this point, from a hedge witch lens? Is there anything that you think would be helpful for them?
I think to take your time, to not panic. There's plenty of time. Don't fall into the first teacher or group that you might come into contact with. Feel whether it feels right for you and trust your own gut instinct, that first impression of somebody or a particular teaching format. Does it sit well with me? Do I feel safe? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel inspired? Yeah. Um, so, firstly, take your time. Secondly, there's an awful lot of thieves on the road to enlightenment. Not everyone who says that they can take you somewhere can actually take you there. So, at any time that they're asking you to mortgage your house or give up all your things to them or whatever, be very, very careful. Yeah. The truth of all that is, the wisdom path will always make itself available to the authentic seeker. You just have to trust the timing for you. And again, remember what I said about the question. Ask, please, can I be guided to a teacher or teachings that will be helpful to my spiritual growth? And as I say, I think the third thing would be start to build a relationship to nature. your own human nature, and nature as life itself. There are all kinds of teachings. You know, you can read the clouds. You can look at reflections in the water. You can watch shadows falling on the path. You can see sticks falling as runes. A shell, you can pick it up and you'll hear whispers of something. The richness of life is unbelievable when we drop all the rubbish that we think it is to be human. Actually, it isn't that at all. But we've kind of been funneled into go to school, go to college, get a qualification, get married, have kids, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And to feel very uncomfortable if we don't do that. But actually, there are so many people feeling so uncomfortable trying to fit that mold, which is unnatural, that, you know, the natural way will return.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
No doubt about it.
Definitely. And I think for me personally, and I imagine a lot of listeners kind of feel like this too, that our dogs are real catalysts for us with that in a variety of ways. I mean, one, they get us out into nature in ways that we wouldn't necessarily take the time to do for ourselves. But again, bringing in this like little wild wolf into the home, it forces that recognition of the connection to all that is in a really beautiful way. And I would argue that if people are kind of familiar with the term familiars, animal familiars, I mean, I can certainly speak to Lucky being part of that, playing that role for me in many respects. That it's not as though he's, you know, carrying out any wicked spells or anything like that that we're told through sort of like mythology and folklore, but he is part of engaging my magical practice. He's part of that spark of me feeling very connected to all that is, and
Does,
supports
sorry,
me. Go ahead. No, and no, and
he,
just supports.
does he come in when you're sort of looking at magical stuff or
Yeah.
meditating? Does he actually come and be with you?
Mm-hmm.
Because animals, especially dogs and cats, they really love that self-contained blissy energy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's part of their psyche, and it's meant to be part of ours. We
Right.
are meant to feel good. We
Exactly.
are
No,
meant to be happy.
I agree. I agree. And they remind us of that. It's funny, you
Mm,
should ask if he comes in. When I was doing my meditation this morning, he was in his little carrier, which I call his casita. That's like his little den, his little safe place. And he was in there, and I went and sat and started meditating. And I sensed him come over, and I just kind of like opened my eyes and looked, and he's just curled up, leaning on
mm,
me. He loves it.
mm.
Every time I do it, he does that. And
Yeah.
that roots me in, it grounds me in what I'm doing. And I feel expanded when he comes and joins me in those kinds of moments.
Mm, mm. Well, they're little blessings, aren't they?
Yeah.
And if I can provide an environment that is peaceful, calm, funny, you know, she can rest when she likes. She can be with me when she likes. She's free to be dog. She's 19 years old.
Right.
She hasn't had the stress of living in a chaotic environment.
Mhm.
And she has lived a very natural life. You know, she's treated with herbs. She doesn't have chemicals in her body. Everything is done naturally. Organic food. It doesn't
Exactly.
stop the fact that she's going to cross at some point, but by golly, yeah, she's a duchess. Oh, I thought I heard her. No, she's still asleep.
Oh, bless her. Bless her. Sally, this has just been so wonderful. If people want to learn more about you and about hedge witchcraft, where's a good place for them to get some more information?
Right. Well, my website is www.sallymorningstar.com, all lowercase.
Perfect.
www SallyMorningstar.com.
Did you work for the BBC by any chance?
No, but my sister did, funnily
Oh,
enough.
there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll leave that link in the show notes so people can click on it from there as well.
All
I
right.
wanted I wanted to ask you one final question that I ask all of my guests, and that is, what do you feel that Rosie Dumpling has taught you about what it means to be human?
An open and loving heart. You just have to look at a dog to see the unconditional love, the loyalty, the friendship. They are so pleased to see you, even if you've only been gone 5 minutes. So she showed me, because I can be a bit serious, she showed me how to have fun. So, for example, I might be wanting to have a little snooze because I haven't slept very well one night. So I'm lying down in the afternoon on the bed, and all of a sudden, just as I'm about to close my eyes, I'll hear ee 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 ee. And she's got her little squeaky donut, and she starts to run backwards and forwards. She reminds me that life is fun. And I don't have to get uptight about that. I don't have to think I'm meant to be having a rest. And so I start giggling. So she's shown me to be in the moment, and also they are so kind. I mean, I'm not talking about, she can bark at cats and stuff, but generally speaking, they're just so innocent. They're innocent. And we have such a duty of care to animals that share their lives with us, to make them as wonderful as possible. And my one wish with little Rosie Dumpling is that she feels that she's had a happy life. She certainly gives that impression. So she's taught me to bring out the more refined human qualities of love, kindness, gentleness, and fun. And joyfulness. We do a lot of joyful things together.
Oh, I
May
love
the
that.
may the joy be with you.
Oh, I love that. What a legacy for her. That's amazing.
Yeah. Bless her
That's
socks.
Sally, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with today?
Be kind. This world is so wounded. It's so hurting. Please, everyone, open your hearts and be kind. For the highest good of all, may we all remember why we are here. The time is now for us to all come together. May the joy be with you.
May the joy be with you as well. Thank you, Sally.
Oh, thank you too, Alexia. It's been wonderful. Lovely to connect.
You too. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with my mentor, Sally Morningstar. What did you think? I'd love to hear about what your journey along the spiritual path has looked like and what you've found useful as a support. Don't forget to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts and get your screenshot to me by May 24th to be considered for the free animal communication session giveaway. Send it to me on Instagram at Mystic Dog Mama. Okay, until next time.